Hello, my name is Alec Miller, and welcome to my presentation about the War of Austrian Succession. The War of Austrian Succession, summed up, is pure chaos. This was a war that raged across Europe and the world. It started with a succession crisis that turned into a violent battles of alliances and strategy. It was a war, a very deadly war that killed and wounded around 750,000 people. However, the net gains for each country in this conflict are nothing considering the amount given up. To give some background on what happened leading up to this war, it starts with Charles VI. Charles had been the ruler of the Habsburg Empire, which is referred to as Austria, and Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Charles had no sons, but he wanted his lineage to hold on to the positions of power that he held. So before he died, Charles wrote the Pragmatic Sanction in 1713, an edict that ensured his heir could be his daughter if he had no sons. Charles spent most of his time as king securing signatures and reassurances that his daughter would succeed him following his death. Maria Theresa was Charles's daughter, who came into power after his death. However, many of people that promised Charles VI that his daughter could become queen took back these promises after Charles's death. This led to a massive controversy around Austria. Some regions of Austria accepted Maria as their queen, however, many did not. During this time, Charles VII, King of Bavaria, would be elected Holy Roman Emperor instead of Maria. During Charles VI's reign, his extreme focus on succession left the Austrian military in shambles. It had been weakened significantly due to a lack of attention and funds. Furthermore, many European powers lacked confidence in Maria to solve Austria's problems. New European powers saw this, including Bavaria, Saxony, and Prussia, which had grown in strength and size in years leading up. They were hungry to step on the scene as European powers. All of these factors added to the Habsburg succession crisis, making an invasion into Austria inevitable. The first conflict in the War of Austrian Succession was the First Silesian War. Silesia was a region of Austria. It was considered one of the, if not the richest parts of the Holy Roman Empire, and extremely important for Austria's economy. In 1740, Frederick II, the King of Prussia, sensed Austrian weakness and used this opportunity to invade Silesia. Frederick left Prussia with nearly 22,000 men in an attempt to take the region of Silesia. The Prussians met Austrian forces in Mollwitz, in which a bloody battle occurred. The Austrian forces had similar manpower compared to the Prussians, the difference being the Austrians had much more infantrymen, while the Prussians had a large cavalry force. After a back and forth battle, the Prussians would eventually be successful and push the Austrians out of Mollwitz. Around 9% of both forces would be killed in the Battle of Mollwitz, and Prussia was able to liberate the whole of Silesia shortly after, and it was confirmed during the Treaty of Breslau in 1742. The First Silesian War would set the standard by which nations supported one another throughout Europe. France, Bavaria, and Saxony would show their support for Prussia early on in the war. All three countries would provide armies and firepower against Austria in the First Silesian War. Spain would get involved on Prussia's side later on in the war, even launching invasions into Austrian land in northern Italy. On the other hand, Austria would see strong support from Great Britain, Russia, and Hanover. Great Britain, alongside Hanover, would begin sending troops to the Austrian Netherlands, which is modern-day Belgium, to fight the French. It is important to understand that even before the war, tensions were high between France and Great Britain. Great Britain was in an ongoing war with Spain, known as the War of Jenkins' Ear. During this war, France aided the Spanish Navy against Great Britain in naval combat. Furthermore, a war in America took place. Great Britain and France fought over territory in Nova Scotia and New England in what was called the King George's War. These conflicts only increased tensions in Europe. In 1744, France officially declared war on Great Britain, citing British military movements on France's border with the Netherlands as its reason. In the same year, Great Britain declared war back. The British reason was because of a fear of French power and strength. They believed that if the French got too large and powerful, it would hinder their own colonial ambitions. France also supported the Jacobites, who wanted to take the throne away from the British king, believing the rightful king belonged to the House of Stuart rather than the current House of Hanover. In 1744, Frederick II launched the second campaign into Austria. This would be known as the Second Silesian War. Austria had deployed most of its forces to the Austrian Netherlands to aid Great Britain in defending their land from France. However, this backfired on Austria because of its weakened military presence on its mainland. Frederick saw this opportunity of weakness and decided to make a push into Austria in an attempt to take more land. Nearly 80,000 troops were marched into Austria's Bohemian region, and they captured Prague in a major Austrian defeat. However, the Prussians' luck ran out when Saxony, who were bribed by Great Britain, switched sides and joined the Austrian side of the war. Adding to this, the Prussians were in a logistical nightmare. Dysentery spread rapidly among Prussian forces, and the food supply had been blocked, causing a shortage of food. Despite having the clear advantage of troops, Frederick was forced to retreat back to Prussia. Later, the Treaty of Dresden would be signed, giving the Prussians full control of Silesia in order for peace. In 1745, an event occurred that would shift the War of Austrian Succession. Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bavaria, Charles VII, died. His son, Maximilian I, inherits his father's positions. However, Maximilian is uninterested in the current war. He makes a deal with Austria saying he will give up his power as Holy Roman Emperor as well as King of Bavaria, and Bavaria will settle for peace if Austria gives Bavaria back the land they took from them in battle. Austria agrees, and Francis I is elected as Holy Roman Emperor shortly after. Francis I is Maria Theresa's husband, which ties the Holy Roman Empire back to the Habsburg dynasty. Part of the Treaty of Dresden said that Frederick and Prussia would recognize Francis I as Holy Roman Emperor. This ensured Prussia wouldn't enter the war again. Despite tension and violence halting in the Holy Roman Empire, the war continued to rage on in Europe. In 1745, Charles the Pretender, who believed he was the rightful king of England, attempted to invade Great Britain alongside the French-backed Jacobite army, with an intention of becoming king. However, they would be stopped and defeated by British forces in the Battle of Culloden. In the Netherlands, the French made a hard push. On May 11, 1745, the French launched an attack against the allied British, Hanover, and Austrian armies. This battle was the Battle of Fontenoy. Around 50,000 troops fought against each other on both sides. In the end, the French would be successful and they would push the British and their allies back to Brussels. This battle would give the French momentum to continue their advancement into Flanders, where the French would be successful in taking land in the Netherlands from Austria. British forces were eventually sent back home to deal with the Jacobite uprising, making French advancement much easier. In Italy, conflict had been slowly gaining momentum. Spain got eager to take land from Austria in northern Italy, more specifically in Lombardy and Genoa regions. France, a close ally of the Spanish, would go on to help the Spanish forces in their Italian conquests. Spanish were taking significant ground in northern Italy until Austria got help from Sardinia. The king of Sardinia happened to be the ruler of Piedmont as well. He felt threatened by the Spanish advancement into northern Italy, so he decided to join the war with the goal of pushing Spanish away from his land. When Prussia left the war, Austria started to focus more on holding their land on the Italian front, where they were successful in pushing the Spanish back from their land. The campaigns in Italy would go on to continue to the very end of the War of Austrian Succession. The War of Austrian Succession was not limited to Europe. In North America, the King George's War continued to rage on between the French and the British. The British were dominant in pushing the French further out of New England and Canada. In India, a conflict between the French East India Company and the British East India Company began to take place. The battles in India went back and forth but ended in a truce. The French gave back British land in India, but in return, the British gave the strategic Canadian military base Louisbourg back to the French. On April 24th, 1748, the War of Austrian Succession would finally come to an end with the signing of the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. This treaty would yet again ensure the land of Silesia to Prussia. Sardinia would gain the Duchy of Milan, and Spain would add the duchies of Parma, Piacenza, and Guastalla to their kingdom. Along after a long, violent war that drained the economies of all nations involved, they decided to finally end their conflicts. It may have ended in a treaty, but it was less of a treaty, more of a truce, as tensions remained high throughout Europe. The War of Austrian Succession would go on to be a precursor to future wars that would run off the tensions gained from the War of Succession. Lastly, these are my sources, and thank you.